March may start out cloudy, rainy, blustery, but that means spring is just around the corner. Time to get out into the yard, get out into the garden, get your hands in the soil. If you like gardening, or if you love just looking at a beautiful garden, you're going to be interested in the latest exhibit at the Portsmouth Art and Cultural Center. We'll tell you all about it right here on this episode of Museum Moments.
Portsmouth on the right side of the river. Rediscover your neighbor, the new Portsmouth.
Welcome to this March-April 2019 episode of Museum Moments. I'm your host, Lauer. There is a new exhibit at the Portsmouth Art and Cultural Center opening at the beginning of March and going through June. The theme is botanics, gardening, things that grow in the earth. Now, for those of you who do gardening, you know that a lot of love, sweat, and toil goes into making any garden grow. And that's also true when it comes to an exhibit about gardening, about flowers, really about anything. We stopped by the Portsmouth Art and Cultural Center and we spoke to Gail Paul as she and her team were in the process of setting up this exhibit. Gail, thanks for joining us on Museum Moments, or thanks for letting us join you here behind the scenes as you set up this new exhibit.
Yes, thank you for coming and photographing.
Yeah, well, tell us about what's going on here. What do you have? What's growing here?
Well, the exhibit's called Horizons As Above, So Below, and it was several years ago, a member of the Garden Club of Virginia came to me and asked if I would do an exhibition that focused on plants. They'll have the Virginia annual meeting here in Portsmouth in May. Mm-hmm. So I started looking at different artists, kind of like how can I, take this theme and bring in something unique and different. And so I started looking around, and anyway, I came what I think is going to be a really interesting installation. And
I know, looking on installing, and most people probably don't think of installing exhibits. They think your job is to, the pictures come in the frames, you hang them on the wall, maybe adjust the lights, or maybe at worst haul in a huge statue. But actually, there is a whole lot more to this.
There's a lot of work that goes into an installation, and particularly in a building like this that has a lot of different stages that have to happen, just from stripping and waxing the floors, to building walls, to moving exhibit stands, getting in the artwork. And then just once you get that established, then bringing in exhibit stands, getting them painted, getting the covers cleaned, and then you can really begin like laying out the show and then install
the artistic end of it, making it look pretty.
Right.
There's actually a ton of physical manual labor that goes into this.
There's a lot of labor.
Now, some of the pieces we have back here, we have some pictures in frames,
yes,
which they'll go on the wall, but then we have this really interesting
these are
sculptures over here.
Right, the botanicals are by Lynn Frayling. Over here we have sculptures by Barbara Kobalinska. And so these actually have to be installed, and you see the poles on the wall, they have a base that they'll then sit on. You're only seeing it in parts because it all has to come together, and actually you're only seeing in pieces. So each one of these is like only half of what the sculpture is.
These are heavy because before we started rolling, you were moving one of the small ones, and it's like...
They're heavy. I don't carry these. This is a job for Seaman moves these around.
But these heavy pieces, they are then like put on top of each other. Something is built out of these, right?
Right. So they get constructed. So like I said, you're only seeing pieces of them here. They'll become much bigger once they come together.
But tell us a little bit, since we're looking at this, tell us a little bit about the artist and what...
Barbara Kobalinska, she's a very interesting artist. She and her husband, he's an engineer, they built a boat and sailed to America. And so anyway, she arrived here. She has a background in theater design, but also an MFA and in ceramics. And so these are actually a lot of these bigger pieces. She goes to a factory that extrudes pipes. And so she builds a lot of these pieces there and gets them fired. And then she brings them home and then usually paints them. So some of them might be fired, like these actually are glazed and fired in a kiln, but to actually work where you can fire something that large, you need a big kiln. So she usually will do those at the factory.
And she has a theater background, and these look very theatrical. This looks like something that would be part of some sort of fantasy scenery and a fantasy
and she
play
does very colorful work. So I see that stemming from her native homeland. So.
And now some of these paintings back here.
Okay, so these are works by Lynn Frayling, and she does botanical works. So she also, it's kind of like combined her love of gardening and cultivating new plants, and but then also brings in her artistic practice. So.
All right, there's some other interesting things. So could we walk over here and look at some of these?
Sure.
All right, let's go.
This piece in front of us, I just set up a piece so you can get a sense of what this is going to be. This is a book installation by Nicole Pietrantoni. She's from Walla Walla, Washington, and she does book arts, but she's a printmaker. And so this just gives you a sense of what this is going to be. Once again, the theme of this exhibition is about plants and plant life, nature.
So these are really interesting looking. They look sort of I don't know, nautical or look like barnacles or something.
These are ceramic pieces by Akiko Tanaka. She spends half a year in Japan and half a year living in Hampton, Virginia. And so she does these wonderful, fantastical ceramic pieces. That's her main medium. And so this is actually, what you see here are multiple parts of installation pieces. So there's one big installation, and then there's other multiple pieces here that all have to be assembled.
Okay, so this is again something else that you build.
Yes, this is work still in progress.
Now, as you walked over here, I noticed that there were a lot of walls and things over this way.
Yes, so those walls have yet to be built. So we still have to put those walls together. People come in and they think, like, you know, there they are.
The
How
walls
did they get there?
Right.
But once again, the whole floor gets stripped and waxed, and then the walls start to be erected.
And so the walls that are erected, they're different for every exhibit?
Yes, we change them around.
Okay.
Sometimes there might be something that remains the same, but we tend to change them around.
Okay, great. Now there's a few more interesting pieces over here, shall we go look at those?
And we're back in more installation.
The more installation. Now these are interesting looking.
Well, these are actually part of sculptures. So these are by John Littleton and Kate Vogel. They're a couple that work collaboratively. These are a combination of bronze and glass once they're completed. So right now you're seeing the bronze components.
Again, something else that you have to build.
Right. So this will be put together, and this is actually not where they'll go on exhibit stands. So right now we're getting the exhibit stands ready and the walls ready, and then they'll go into place, and then we'll put the glass on. Wow.
And again, I see there are paintings back here. These are oil, acrylics?
They're mixed media paintings on canvas by Karen Blair. She's a Crozet, Virginia artist, and so she actually painted a lot of cityscapes, and recently, I wouldn't say recently, a few years ago, moved into the country in Crozet. She's got this beautiful background setting, and so the landscapes are really breathtaking there. So
that becomes her inspiration.
That becomes her inspiration. And she's also a member of the Garden Club of Virginia.
Okay. So tell us when the exhibit will open.
The exhibit opens on March 1st, Friday night from 5 to 8 p.m. We'll have a reception. So everyone's welcome to join us from 5 to 8. It's free and open to the public. And then also for Saturday, we are free and open to the public, and we'll have programming that's in conjunction with it.
Okay.
We'll have another glass artist. Her work hasn't arrived yet, Emily Williams, and she'll be doing a glass demonstration that Saturday.
All right. Now, when it goes through...
June 23rd, this exhibition is up.
Okay. So you have quite a while to see it. And what is the title again?
It's Horizons as Above, So Below.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, thanks for letting us intrude. I know you're busy.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for showing us these things and telling us about it. Anything else you'd like to say?
Well, we have one more exhibit that's going to open in March.
Okay.
And that's called Our Living Past, and that features a music maker Relief Foundation again. So that's a foundation founded by Tim Duffy and North Carolina, and we'll also do a musical performance in conjunction with that. So that opens March 16th.
And that'll be downstairs?
That'll be downstairs.
Okay.
So that exhibit is right now just sitting in crates.
Okay, waiting for this to get up.
Waiting for this to be installed, and then we'll get to work on that.
All right, well, I will let you get back to work. And I'm going to talk to Stephen about some of the events that you have coming up.
Okay.
Stephen Gurnett. Hello.
Good day, sir.
Good to see you. Now, you're going to tell us about some of the events that are coming up here at the Art and Cultural Center.
Yeah.
Okay, so what do you have in the works?
Well, the curator, Gail Paul, has been creating some amazing exhibits that will open for the spring. The first one will be Horizons, As Above, So Below, which will be in this gallery that we are standing in. And so we've also tried to schedule some programming to highlight the exhibits. Of course, the Horizons exhibit features artwork that is inspired by plant life. So we're going to have some of these artists come and do activities during our first weekend series. So we continue this every year from March through October. So the first one, the first Friday event will be this about a week from today, March 1st. And we'll open this exhibit, and we'll have, in lieu of music, the concert in the Courtyard series is actually going to start with a comedy act by Push Comedy Theater.
Great.
And that'll go from 5 to 7:30, and then we'll be open till 8 o'clock.
And this is the same every first Friday of every month?
Yes.
So this will be also in April and May?
Yep, exactly, with a new musical act most of the time. And everything is free. It's free and open to the public. We usually have light refreshments, and the exhibits and the concert are all free. And then the following Saturdays are also free events, and that's when we have some of these activities that I was talking about earlier. So the first Saturdays we're open from 10 to 5.
And it's free.
And it's all free. And then in the morning for March 2nd, we're going to have a glass artist, Emily Williams, who's going to demonstrate her torch work. And we've had her in exhibits before, and she's demonstrated before, but she's...
what is torch work?
Torch work is you're working with hot glass, but not on a large scale like with glass blowing. So you've got a glass cane, like a stick, and then a torch. And so you can do this, it's much more portable than, say, a huge kiln and furnace with molten glass that you have to take out of an oven. That's a little bit more difficult. So she comes and she demonstrates how she creates these magnificent sea life looking creatures with glass and her torch. And so she'll melt it and then weave this web into a piece of coral or an anemone, something that looks like it comes from the sea. They're absolutely gorgeous. So her work will be in the exhibit, and that'll be in the morning, probably from about 10 till 1 o'clock. And then the following month in April, we're going to have another artist. Oh no, that's in May, I'm sorry. In April, we're going to have this kite making activity. April is kite month. Did you know that?
I know there was a kite festival here for years.
Well, we don't have the festival anymore, but we still offer kite kits for sale. So these are Delta kites, and for $5, folks can purchase their Delta kite, and the exhibits will be open free on the April 1st Saturday, but people can purchase these and then they can decorate them with magic markers.
Okay.
Okay. And so it's very easy to draw on, and we'll have different colors. It's amazing the colors that Sharpies come in these days. And these suckers fly so nicely. I wish we had more room here, but
well, you know, in the past, you've run around the courtyard trying to fly one. But hey, that's pretty impressive.
But I can show you a little bit. I used to have these little kites, these miniature kites that I could fly, and those are really for indoors. This is something where you have to fly outdoors.
Well, it's hard to get wind.
It's hard to get wind in the art gallery, so. But then in May, we're going to have another artist, like I said, who's also in the exhibit. Her name's Lynn Frayling. I know. You get certain artists and you're talking, I bet there's a lot of wind. We had a kite exhibit once, and there were kite flyers that flew kites around in the gallery, believe it or not.
I believe it.
So Lynn Frayling, she's a local artist, and she does beautiful watercolors of plant specimens. So these are like plant illustrations that you'd find from science, but she uses watercolors to do these illustrations.
The detail on the petals.
Yes,
and all.
they're fantastic.
See the veins and everything.
So she's going to be doing an art activity about that same time in the morning, from 10 to 1 o'clock. And it'll be in the courtyard, or if it's raining outside, she'll have it inside. And at the same time, we're going to have a musical group. So we will have just opened the
downstairs
exhibit, which is a repeat of the exhibit we had last year of musicians. They are photographs taken by Tim Duffy, who started the Music Maker Relief Foundation. Okay. And so we're going to have a lot of musical events that highlight that exhibit, and we're going to start that in April with the Who We Are Not Trio. And they're going to play in the courtyard at the same time that Lynn Fraley is doing her art activity. And then but this is going to be a group of new musicians. This will be different photographs of different people. And we're going to have another event that focuses on those musicians, but it'll like we did last year. But we're going to have a different group of musicians, and it's going to be on May 2nd at Roger Brown's. Folks can purchase their tickets through Fest Events, so it's something that is organized by the Virginia Arts Festival.
Great.
And so these are folk musicians. Many of them have helped pioneer American folk music throughout the South and the Southeast.
Now, if people want to find out more about this, or just explore what's coming up, can they go to the website?
They can go to the city website,
or to
portsmouthvirginia.gov, and Ports Events, and there'll be a whole list of the events coming up. But yes, our website specifically for this site will be portsmouthartcenter.com.
Okay.
And and so people can go on there, or they can just call and talk to me.
Oh, well,
I love talking to people and bragging about the events we have here.
All right, well, thanks for coming on camera and bragging about them.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Stephen. The Portsmouth Naval Shipyard Museum will be opening later this year. Now, the Shipyard Museum is home to thousands of historical artifacts, all of which must be preserved. We're going to head inside, where curator Diane Cripps is going to show us 2 artifacts that were recently preserved. Diane, welcome back to Museum Moments.
Thanks, Rob.
So, what do you have going on here at the Naval Shipyard Museum?
Well, behind the scenes, we've got some, museum functions happening that a lot of visitors don't often know about. One of our biggest jobs in the history world is to preserve the collections that we have. And I'm fond of saying it's an impossible job, because everybody's heard the expression, nothing lasts forever. And curators fight that every day. And there's a lot of things we do to the collection that's passive and easy, like keeping things in boxes, keeping them away from light that fades them, keeping the pests away, and that kind of thing. But every once in a while, we have to pay a little more attention to artifacts that need more help than that to preserve them. In a big part because we can't display them if they're in really bad condition. They're not strong enough to handle the rigors of being on display. And it's not something everybody knows about that goes on behind the scenes, but in the past couple of years we have had some major conservation projects going on. And so I thought we would talk about a couple of the things that we've recently had conserved, that we've actually sent out to conservators who are experts in their particular field. And so we've had a couple of textile projects done. I've never been very good with the needle arts, so it's great to be able to call on people who do this for a living. And so we're standing right in front of our most recent project, which was a uniform that we had in our collection. It's actually the oldest one we had. It's from 1852, so it's pre-Civil War. And the great thing about a collection that has a lot of military things in it is that uniforms were built to be tough. So they don't always need a lot of restoration, especially from the outside. But the difficult thing is when you want to exhibit something, it's the lining that really matters in a lot of cases. So this uniform, this is a jacket from, like I said, 1852. It's from a gentleman named Captain William Hunter, who was here in Portsmouth at the shipyard. And he has an interesting story because he was an engineer and he worked on ship design, particularly propulsion, and he was one of the first ones to say, what happens if we sink a paddle wheel below the waterline? So he was involved in the early development of a propeller that lots of ships, all ships, use today. But his uniform was not ready for exhibit. We had it in an archival box, but the lining, we've got some pictures of what it looked like before. The lining was really torn up. It had splits in some of the seams. The collar was detached. And it had just been, worn heavily, and after this much time, it needed some restoration. So we called in a conservator from Maryland, whose name is Polly Willman, and she took it to her studio and got it ready for exhibit again. Wow. It doesn't mean it can stay on exhibit in perpetuity. We still need to give some things rest over time, but she made a custom mannequin for it, so we're kind of looking at Captain Hunter standing in front of us here, because that's really the best way to show a lot of clothing. They were made to be three-dimensional.
Right.
And so, displaying it flat doesn't quite help the garment or show what it was really like to be worn. So this is about as close as we can come to meeting Captain Hunter. But she did an awful lot of restoration to the lining, sewing seams back together, and stabilizing things, because while she was preserving the ripped pieces of some of the lining, she would cover them with things and preserve the original materials, but make it stable enough to be displayed. So to my knowledge, I don't think this uniform has ever been on display, and if it was on display, it was decades ago. So now it's ready to be shown again.
Well, how long did that process take? How long did she have it with her?
It took a couple of months once she took it to her studio. Whenever you work with a conservator, they take it and they evaluate it first, and then they make a proposal. And it's kind of interesting to see, because it's usually a good, better, best kind of situation. And you have to make some choices about how far you're going to go with the conservation. And sometimes there are things that just can't be fixed, and you have to work around it and make compromises. So it's really a give and take with the conservator about what a garment needs and what you're going to do with it. If it's something you own personally, how are you going to display it? Is it going to be in your house? Are you going to wear it? Those aren't questions we ask in the museum field. We just want to try to display things.
When this is displayed, will it be displayed like in a clear box so people can walk around
and see from all sides? We'll have a case mounted, or a case made for it, so that people could examine it. The great thing about textiles is that they appeal to multiple audiences. Some people are really interested in the military aspect and the history of what he did as a naval engineer. Other people might be really into the textile part of it, and the beautiful, beautiful, tightly woven wool that it's made of. You can't even see the weave in it.
It looks new. I mean, it really does. The coat itself.
The navy fabric, the navy blue fabric, is phenomenal. And some of those old uniforms were really made of high quality materials. So it's nice to work with them from a conservation point of view, because there's always some part of the garment that's in really good shape. You just have to make sure the rest of it is structurally sound enough to exhibit it.
Great. And you had another one too, you said?
We do. It's behind me here, so if we take a couple steps this way. This is a flag that we had conserved a few years back. This is one of the first textile projects we were able to do when I got here. And this has an interesting history, because it was mounted for a really long time in an old frame. The collection, a lot of the collection here at the Naval Shipyard Museum came from the shipyard, because that's where the museum was at first. And I think this was on display there. I think we have a photograph that showed it on display in that gallery, but it never left its frame that it was put in there. And today, while we're looking at it, the red part of it looks pretty solid and together. But when we had it in storage here, because it was not ready for display, it was basically crumbling. It was made of silk, or it is made of silk. And what happens to silk when it gets old is that it just becomes totally brittle, and it's not even fabric anymore. You can't sew on it, it'll just dissolve into tiny fibers. And it was in a frame in between a couple of layers of plastic, and I've got a picture of what it looked like before we sent it off, and you can see this reflection. Right, totally letting go of itself, and there was no way it was ever going to be a flag again. You can't reverse that process with silk. So it was either find some way to conserve it, or it would go in the trash bin. And this is a pretty significant artifact from Portsmouth's history. It's a guidon, which is basically a battle flag. It was used in the heat of battle to kind of lead a group of soldiers along so they'd know where to go if it was smoky and dirty. And it's from the Grimes Battery. It's Civil War era flag, but that artillery group in Portsmouth was created way back in about 1810, and they fought in the War of 1812, and that group existed all through those decades, actually on into the 20th century until it was absorbed into a National Guard unit not too long ago, just a couple of decades ago.
Wow.
So it has a long history in Portsmouth. So we said let's try to save this. Maybe there's somebody out there who can conserve this. So we found a conservator named Jessica Hack in New Orleans who was known for mounting flags like this. And this is really a case of the kind of choices you make when you conserve something, because she permanently mounted it to what is essentially a stretcher like a painting is on. And therefore, you'll never see the back side of it again. It has another one of these symbols on the other side, but it's either that or, you know, it goes away forever.
Right.
So she did a phenomenal job, and I have pictures of it that show how she cleaned it. You know, she pieced it together like a 1,000-piece puzzle on a grid. And then I used Q-tips and distilled water to just gently clean it.
Like each fiber of silk.
Right, and she probably didn't do any rubbing. It was probably just touch, touch, touch. You know, the techniques she used were, you know, you got to have a lot of patience and use the right materials. And you don't throw it in the washing machine. You know, you have to know what you're doing. And then I think what she used was a dry mounting technique with infill fabric, so that it doesn't look so jarringly, you know, broken apart anymore. But you can still tell what's old and what's new.
Right. So is that like there's a red backing behind it of fabric?
Right. So that when you look at it, you can tell the really smooth, new-looking red parts are new, and the ones that are kind of jagged and a little stained are the old parts.
But even this close, though, it's the difference is not all that jarring. It really isn't.
It's visually really great looking.
So how did you get this to her if it was this fragile?
I explained to her how it was when we unframed it, which was between 2 layers of pliable plastic. And she said, I'm going to tell you this, you're going to think I'm crazy, but she said, roll it up and put it in a tube like you'd mail architectural drawings. So we FedExed it to her, and you know, we were in constant phone contact, so she would let me know it arrived safely, you know, and then she just unrolled it and unpacked it and started working on it.
As fragile as it looks in the pictures, it's a wonder that you can even roll it.
We have a picture of her working on it, and you know, she's there at her work table with pieces of it just spread out, kind of really like a puzzle to put it back together. And then every last bit of fringe, everything's sewn down, it's all stabilized, and she did a phenomenal job. And I've never seen, you know, another project like this, but Jessica Hack has done this before. So if you know, the conservation world is really amazing. It's full of science, it's full of interesting techniques, and sometimes you have to go that route if you're going to preserve something really important, you know. So I'm pleased with how this turned out, and it's a real piece of Portsmouth history.
That's great. Well, thanks for sharing this with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. This is one of my favorite parts of the museum field to talk about. I'm just geeking out as a museum nerd for this stuff.
Away.
Yep.
Thanks, Diane.
My pleasure, Rob.
Behind me is the old Seaboard Railroad building. The railroad has had an interesting role in the history of Portsmouth. Now, just down the street at the Children's Museum of Virginia is the Lancaster Toy Train exhibit, one of the biggest draws that the museum has. Recently, a new train has rolled into the museum, one beloved by children everywhere. We're going to head down there and find out more about this very beloved train. I'm joined by Andre Burton from the Children's Museum of Virginia's exhibits. Welcome, Andre.
How you doing?
So a new train has rolled into here, a beloved train. Which train is this?
I think it's a train everyone knows, Thomas. Big Thomas the train engine, he's here.
Thomas the train.
Yes.
And he's right behind us.
Actually, he is. He's here chilling out with us today. Yeah. He's been here since January 26th, actually. So he's been here for a while, for about a month. He's been hanging out with us, but he's having a good time. He'll be here for a few more months, so so far we're loving it.
Yeah, well, I've noticed, I've not seen it this crowded in a long time here, so it's been really popular?
It really has been, and it hasn't slowed down since our opening day on the 26th. It's been, you know, jam-packed. We've had people coming in and out nonstop, and they're loving it too. They can't get enough. We've had people coming back. You know, just in the short time that it's been open, we've had people coming in and coming back already. So, you know, everyone's loving it here. We're loving it here. So we're having fun. We have a lot of things in this exhibit that have to do with education about the trains and the steam engines and how trains work. And so you know, some of the part of the exhibit is about the history and where everything came from, where the show came from, but a lot of it is what trains look like on the inside, old-fashioned trains, or you know, how did the train get started moving? How does it get rolling? You know, what types of materials do they use for fuel? Stuff like that. So it's good for a large range of ages. The exhibit, you know, I've seen 2-year-olds in here, and I've seen, you know, larger kids, elementary, middle school kids.
So how long will this be here now?
This is going to be here until May 12th.
Okay, and
so
this is every day of the week, but every day that you're open?
Every single day that we're open.
So if you want to check out Thomas the Train, be sure to come to the Children's Museum of Virginia. Thanks for joining us, Andre.
And thanks for having us. Thanks for stopping by.
That's it for our show today. If you'd like more information about any of the exhibits or the events featured on today's show, simply log on to www.portsvaevents.com. I'm Rod Lauer. Join me next time for our May-June 2019 episode of Museum Moments.
Portsmouth on the right side of the river. Rediscover your neighbor, the new Portsmouth.